Hey, taxi! I'm late for the movies. To the cinema, please.
Let's get this.
Hi guys, welcome back to SwitchUp. It is with some excitement that I present the first review from our new writer, Rob, aka Robnor the Viking, but that's a long story. A good friend of mine, and he's watched the channel for a while, and yeah, this is his first review, and it's of Taxi Chaos on the Nintendo Switch. If you're of a certain age and was a gamer in perhaps the late 90s to early 2000s, then you'll remember Sega's original Crazy Taxi game released in 1999. Although Team 6 Studios' Taxi Chaos isn't a direct sequel, it might as well be. In fact, many people are calling it a spiritual successor, and it's so similar that even Sega has given the game a thumbs up and agreed to distribute it in Japan, which is a big deal for Team 6 because let's be honest, they're quite protective with their own IPs. So, is Taxi Chaos a modern day reincarnation of the original addictive and insanely fun but panic-inducing taxi driving classic? Or is it fair to say you should miss this ride? Let's find out.
Watch out!
Here we go!
In terms of the game's narrative, well, there isn't one, as you'd expect. Does this game really require any real story? I don't think so. It's a classic pick up and play without having to worry about any of those complexities. As far as gameplay and controls go then, Taxi Chaos is an arcade-style racing game. Though you won't be racing against other cars, you're racing against the clock, as well as the high scores of your online comrades, which in all honesty is something I found far more stressful. When you pick up a new customer, you're allowed a specific time depending on the distance to your destination. There are various difficulty levels depending on the amount of time as well as the difficulty to complete the job, and these are represented by icons and rings around the potential passengers, with blue being the easiest, then green, yellow, orange, and then red being the toughest. There's also the ever-present timer in the top corner of the screen that's telling you just how long you have left in that current game. With every successful job you complete, a few seconds will be added to this timer, but don't get too comfortable. That time is counting down and the time stops for no man or woman, child, or you get it. Also, take note that the two character drivers are charging a fare during the job that often runs into the tens of thousands of dollars for a single job. Clearly I'm in the wrong line of work. At the end of the game, you're given a star rating out of 5 and the total amount you've earned. Customers will comment on your driving ability, and this may also affect things, but essentially the game consists of 3 types of game modes. You have that arcade, which in all honesty was my favourite and was very similar to that classic Crazy Taxi experience. Then there's free roam mode, which gets rid of the timer in the corner, although you will still be able to pick up passengers who have their individual timers, but there's no end to the experience. It provides a really good opportunity to learn the layout of the city. And then there's pro mode, which is tough, as in really tough, and the reason it's so hard is because it turns off the game's GPS system, meaning the arrow that would normally tell you which direction to go next is no longer there. And in this game mode, that dreaded timer would normally run out before I've even completed the first job because I didn't know where I was going. Obviously designed for veteran players who have memorized the layout of the map and are able to look at the image at the bottom left of the screen and then navigate there seamlessly. Not something I could do. Character selection is simple enough. You've either got Vinny, who I can't tell if he's middle-aged or just grey-haired, and then there's Cleo, who apparently is a self-styled influencer. How do I know that, you ask? Well, it says it on the eShop. It's the only way I know that. Once you've chosen your victim, it's time to choose your ride. You unlock more vehicles as you progress through the game, although this isn't explicitly told to the player, each car having different abilities such as handling and acceleration. Then, once you've chosen your ride, you're thrown into Yellow City, which is basically a very simplified Manhattan, kind of. Once it's loaded, you're pretty much left to your own devices to cause havoc. Other than the occasional control prompt, the game is self-explanatory. It doesn't need a long tutorial. You'll pick it up quite quickly. Unless you count other road users, there's no bad guy. There doesn't really need to be. There's only one real goal: pick up some of the city's crazy passengers and deliver them to their destination in a timely, yet unavoidably destructive and intense fashion. There's also collectibles hidden around the city that will help you to unlock some of the latter cars and get those achievements completed. You don't need to concern yourself with the vehicle or how it runs because it just works. It goes forward and backwards, left and right, and it has a handy boost that can be done by holding down 2 triggers together. The game's physics are, well, they're arcade. It doesn't matter if you're driving up a slope down some steps, or even through water. They'll have no effect whatsoever on the car's overall performance other than to mildly slow it down. One thing I did find was that there's a few handy ramps placed throughout the city that will give you access to some shortcuts, as well as ones placed that you can jump to, more on that later, and you may even find yourself driving on the rooftops of some buildings. The pedestrians have got the useful arcade-style sixth sense of getting out of the way of being horrifically crushed, so that's good. Now, despite the fact that there's 3 different game modes, it does begin to become quite tedious after a couple of hours of gameplay. There's a few reasons for this, including potential customers are always stood in the same places, the variety of NPCs is lacking, you can pick the same NPC model up several times in a row despite just dropping them off in a different location. I'd like to see a little more variety in the gameplay to mix things up, perhaps more traffic or weather effects. Little things to create more variety. Although there is a limited control in terms of camera use, using the right analog stick, I think varied camera angles would also benefit the game. The standard angle is right behind the car, and that limits your field of view. One that's a touch further away would benefit, especially when you're looking for a new fare, and some will lament the lack of a map. Gameplay for Taxi Chaos was fun, addictive and simple, but it's also quite repetitive. I'd give it 14 out of 20. Taxi Chaos's controls are intuitive, and if you've ever played a racing game, you'll know exactly how to play this one. The ZR is used to accelerate, ZL is used to reverse, the left analog controls the steering, and the right one controls the camera. You've got B and A buttons, which can be used to jump the car, and the longer you hold down, the higher you're going to jump. You could also use the Y button to cancel the job, as let's be honest, sometimes those customers just have too much negative energy. They've got to go. As I said, a different camera angle would have been nice. Overall, I give the controls though 15 out of 20. In terms of visuals and performance then, well, performance is fairly decent. It's holding a 30 FPS for the majority of your playtime, but unfortunately there are frame rate inconsistencies. It seems the frame pacing is slightly off, which can lead to a less than fluid feeling at times. There are also some bugs in the game, as you can see. I played the game both in docked and handheld, and it coped with both well enough. There weren't any noticeable differences between the two, but one thing you will notice is the draw distance is very short, and sometimes the game will struggle to render a building's texture until I was right up in front of it. The visual style is pleasant enough and falls very much in line with the crazy taxi ethos. However, in all honesty, I don't think it's quite the same quality. Yes, it has the eye-popping, oversaturated colours you'd expect, but other elements like the UI design and a number of minor bugs show a lack of polish. I give the visuals 11 out of 20. Now as for the audio, oh boy, the audio.
What's wrong?
The whole gag is ruined.
Once you've played the game for 10 minutes, you will have heard every sound that it has to offer, and there's no two ways about it, it gets repetitive. That extends to the dialogue between Vinny and Cleo and the other passengers. I'm pretty certain the Team 6 studios really tried hard to add a lot of humour into their conversations, but let's just say, I turned the voice audio slider right down to 0. I get it, this is a casual game, but come on, how many times can you hear the same conversation? Huh? I wonder what's for dinner tonight. Then there's the soundtrack. Well, I say soundtrack, what I mean is the constant hi-hat that goes on in the background, the menus, throughout the gameplay, while I'm cooking dinner, and in my nightmares. It just never stops. And look, it's very arcade sounding, but you will long for some variety in terms of the musical score. Audio for me scores 8 out of 20. Taxi Chaos is one of those games that you play when you're looking to have a simple, non-complicated experience. However, it's currently on the Switch store for £28.34. Do I think it's worth nearly 30 quid currently? Honestly, I can't justify spending that much on this game at the moment. After a couple of hours, you'll have completed most of what the game has to offer, the nostalgia will have worn off, and except for maybe a couple of vehicles that require collectibles to unlock, you may potentially regret spending that much. Value for me scores 11 out of 20.
I'm late for the movies. To the cinema, please.
Let's get this bread.
In conclusion then, Taxi Chaos is a simple fun game that will keep you occupied if only for a brief period of time. It does bring back nostalgic memories of those days back in the late 90s and early 2000s when ripping up the streets in a similar yellow taxi was a new and challenging experience. You can hit as many cars as you like, the customers will never refuse to pay, so that's a bonus. The map's vibrant and colourful with potential fares around every corner, but some of that feeling has certainly faded since then. Team 6 have created a game that can be both challenging and rewarding, and I'll be going back to it when I have some time, and hopefully when we see a patch or two on the Switch version, just to beat those high scores. And that's half the challenge of these games, beating those high scores. This one just requires a little bit more TLC. I give it a SwitchUp score of 59%. Well, there we have it. A big thanks to Aka Robnor the Viking for writing this review. My goodness, for your first ever written review, I think that is damn good. Let him know down in the comments how you think he's done. I think he certainly gets the SwitchUp sense of humour. A big thanks to our patrons who support the channel each and every month. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it SwitchUp. Oh, and we've got so many reviews coming out in the next few days. Make sure you got your notifications switched on, because we've got some absolutely great games to look at. Well, they might be terrible, but they're big names. So there you go. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it SwitchUp. Cheers, guys. See ya!